Every story has a chapter that looks like the end. A boat swallowed by waves, a door that only locks from the outside, a den full of teeth closing in around you in the dark. If you are living in a chapter like that right now, hear this: you are not forgotten, and you are not alone. Scripture says it plainly: we are troubled on every side, yet not distressed, perplexed but not in despair, cast down but not destroyed. Today we are walking through three men who were sold, imprisoned, and thrown to die: a shepherd's favorite son, a beaten missionary, and a faithful official, and watching exactly how God turned every one of their worst nights into someone else's greatest testimony. Genesis tells us about a teenager named Joseph, his father's favorite, given a coat that made his brothers hate him a little more every day he wore it. Their jealousy curdled into something darker. They stripped that coat off his back, threw him into a dry well, and sold him to the first caravan of traders that happened to pass by. 17 years old, dragged in chains to a foreign country, sold again like property to a man named Potiphar. Joseph served faithfully, refused to sin, even when it would have been easy and private, and got thrown into prison anyway on a lie that was never his fault. 2 years. 2 years of hard time for a crime he didn't commit, forgotten by the one man he'd helped who promised to remember him. If anyone had a right to become bitter in the dark, it was Joseph. But the same word that tried him in that well never stopped working. The Lord was with Joseph even there, even then, even when Joseph couldn't feel a single trace of him. Centuries later, in a Roman prison in Philippi, two missionaries named Paul and Silas sat with their feet locked in stocks, backs freshly torn open by rods, having done nothing but cast a demon out of a slave girl and cost her owners some money. Most people in that position spend midnight groaning, or planning revenge, or begging God to explain himself. Paul and Silas spent midnight praying and singing hymns loud enough that the other prisoners could hear every word. And at that exact hour, not before, not after, a great earthquake shook the foundations of that prison so hard every door flew open and every chain fell loose. The jailer, certain his prisoners had escaped and about to take his own life over it, found every single one of them still sitting right there. By morning, that jailer and his whole household were baptized, believing in the God whose prisoners sing in chains at midnight instead of cursing the dark. Daniel was the best administrator in the whole Persian Empire, so good that jealous men couldn't find one single thing to accuse him of, except his faithfulness. So they wrote a law they knew he couldn't obey: pray to any god or man except the king for 30 days, or be thrown to the lions. Daniel didn't hide, didn't negotiate, didn't even close his window. He knelt down in full view of the city, 3 times a day, exactly like he always had, and prayed anyway. They threw him into the den that same night, rolled a stone across the entrance, and sealed it with the king's own signet. In the morning, the king ran to that stone shouting Daniel's name, terrified of what he'd allowed to happen. From inside the den, very much alive, came the answer: "My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths." 22 years after that well, that same Joseph stood as the second most powerful man in Egypt, not because the pit and the prison were a detour from his purpose, but because they were the road to it. Every skill he'd need to save an entire region from famine, he'd learned in exactly those years everyone else called wasted. When the famine finally came, the same brothers who sold him showed up starving, bowing to a governor they didn't recognize as their own brother. Joseph could have had every one of them executed. Instead, he wept, revealed who he was, and said the words that reframe every unfair thing that has ever happened to you. "You meant evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to save many people alive. The pit was never wasted. It was preparation wearing a disguise." Maybe your pit doesn't have a well or a coat covered in blood. Maybe it's a diagnosis, a layoff, a marriage you don't know how to save, a habit you can't seem to outpray. Maybe your prison isn't made of stone, but of a waiting room, a mailbox full of bills, a phone that never rings with the news you're hoping for. Here is what Joseph, and Paul and Silas and Daniel all have in common. None of them could see the ending while they were living the middle. They just kept being faithful in the dark, one ordinary decision at a time, and let God write the parts they couldn't control. That is still how this works. That is still how it will work for you. So speak this over your own life, out loud, and mean it. All things work together for good to those who love God, to those called according to his purpose. Not some things, not the easy things, all things. Count it all joy when you fall into every kind of trial, knowing the testing of your faith produces patience, and patience, when it's finished its work, leaves you lacking nothing. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, many, not none, but the Lord delivers him out of every one of them. This is not denial. This is not pretending the pit doesn't hurt. This is choosing to believe, in the middle of the well, in the middle of the cell, in the middle of the den, that the God who was faithful to Joseph, to Paul and Silas, to Daniel, has not changed his mind about being faithful to you. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they will not sweep you away. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned, and the flame will not consume you. That is not a promise that the water or the fire will never come. It's a promise about who is standing in the middle of it with you. So get up out of whatever well you've been sitting in. Walk out from behind whatever door you thought was locked for good. Whatever den you've been thrown into. Remember, the mouths that were meant to destroy you are not the final word. God still shuts lions' mouths. God still splits open earthquakes at midnight. God still turns pits into palaces. Your chapter is not finished. Keep going. Thrive through the trial.